So thanks everybody for joining. We're gonna be here for about an hour and we're gonna be talking about D2C operations, and the conversation will probably expand a little bit beyond that too, as it always does. We've got 5 awesome panelists and primarily operators. And then we have also Tim, who is from Shopify, who works with 10 brands, which is pretty exciting because he can give us more context on like kind of the space in total. To kick this off, and oh, by the way, please, if you have any questions, please ask questions in the chat and show it to everyone so other people can see the questions too, in case they have the same question, not just the panelists. So I'm gonna get going, and I actually just wanna start with a little bit of introductions and not just like, hey, I'm Drew from BOMBAS, but like, hey, I'm Drew from BOMBAS. This is what I'm working on. This is a little bit of my background, because I think a lot of folks on here will be in that role, and some people will want to be in that role in the future. And everybody's really curious about that. So why don't we start with Drew, and then I'll go around in my circle. So we'll go to Alex next.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Drew Barker. I'm the Senior Director of Operations at BOMBAS. Before BOMBAS, was at 2 other startups, also in the e-commerce space, but have since been with BOMBAS for about 5 years. Ops at BOMBAS oversees inbound freight, warehousing and fulfillment, and outbound freight. So of course, right now we're focused on getting our goods out of the stinking ports and worrying about shipping to customers for holiday. Love
it. Thank you. Alex?
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Kazikas. I'm the Director of Operations at Primary.com. Just a little background about Primary. It was founded by 2 parents, Christina Carbonell and Galen Bernard, that were just frustrated by the experience. So basically, Primary isn't about labels or slogans. It's just about like soft, sustainable fabrics in a wide range of colors, backed by great experience. I've been with Primary for about 3.5, almost 4 years now at this point. My previous work was at Bonobos, where I was there for about 6 years doing operations as well. And my role at Primary is 2 functions. One oversees fulfillment operations, so basically managing the product lifecycle and partnerships of products getting domestically when it arrives at a warehouse to out to our customers, and inevitably a very small portion coming back to us. So all the logistic partners and 3PLs that go in that. And then I also oversee the customer experience team. So the team that manages all the contacts and questions that our customers ask us.
I love it. I was a customer of Bonobos. My kids are customers of Primary, so thank you for your service.
Sure, you got it.
Why don't we go, let's go Bridget and then Chaz, and then wind up with Tim.
Hi, I'm Bridget Foster. I'm the COO of Soludos, which is a footwear brand out of New York City. I think we're a lot smaller than Bonobos and BOMBAS, but operations for us, I run finance and ops and CX. So it's really kind of all the inbound, outbound planning, working really closely with e-com and wholesale. And really our focus for the past few months has been very much around inbound logistics. And because we're multi-channel, trying to make sure that inventory is getting it to the group that's going to be able to sell it first and most efficiently, and then trying to prioritize getting additional units in to fill overall demand. So it's been a tricky year. I thought 2020 was a nightmare, and turns out that was a piece of cake compared to 2021.
Thank you. We're going to dig into this, and I definitely want to at some point throughout this, like, or we can always weave it in, is talk about the tension between like e-commerce and the goals versus the pain right now of logistics and inbounding, where your inventory is and discounting and all that. So yeah. Wherever we can give advice to the audience, I think that'll be useful, especially given that we have weeks right until Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So Chaz, I think you're up.
Great. I'm Chaz Flexman. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Starday Foods. We're kind of building a next generation Nestle using kind of data science at the core to figure out both where and what we build. Previously, I was part of the founding team of Pattern Brands, where I ran product and ops. I do e-commerce infrastructure investing as well. Spent time in venture capital at Andreessen Horowitz. Ran a company called Wink, which is one of the first smart home platforms that sold off of electronics. And I've kind of been in and around physical products, supply chain, and manufacturing most of my career.
Yeah, thank you. First product is gooey and it is delicious. So maybe you should put the link in there. I'm going to let you do one little like shout out because it's a new one. Tim, please.
Hi, and I'm Tim Fraser. I'm a senior merchant success manager here at Shopify. So I manage the relationship with a number of our brands. I have the pleasure of working with some of our most innovative brands myself and my team really, we're just here to ensure the success of those brands, whether that's showing them strategy, whether that's showing them new avenues, whether that's just helping them through the day-to-day struggles of 2020 and 2021. So excited to be here.
Alex has his hand up. Let's do this.
Oh,
I don't know if that was on purpose. Oh,
not
come on.
Sorry.
Well, it's still good. That was good. I was like, we were going to go to Drew, but we can go back to Alex right now. All right, man. Well, very good. So Drew, I'm going to start with you, and then I would love it if anybody else wanted to chime in as well. Look, BOMBAS is like one of the biggest, fastest growing, whatever like superlative we want to use for you guys as a D2C brand. I'm really curious, like how we should think about your tech stack to create like a great experience. And you could think about that both like operationally for your team, but also like for that customer experience. What are kind of the key components? How do you make those decisions? Like you can take that wherever you want.
Sure. So we are a Shopify brand. I don't know if everyone here is.
Everybody. Yeah.
Everyone is. Okay.
Yes.
So for the first many years, we integrated Shopify directly with our 3PL. And that worked for us because the 3PL had a relatively modern WMS and we had read access to that WMS. So you could get that granular timestamp data on pick, pack, ship. Inevitably, like any brand, we needed to add an ERP system. As you grow, your data gets more complex. So you might be adding more SKUs, more vendors, have inventory management strategy, adopting GAAP accounting principles, like the whole bit. And you need that hub for all of those things to come together. ERP was like a capital G giant project for us. And I don't think we knew quite how capital G giant it was when we kicked off. So advice here is just to, give yourself a year to do that project. Have a built up tech team and have operators of the business who are willing to crawl through the minutia of what's the process today and what should it be with this like bajillion-dollar piece of software that we're buying.
When you looked at getting the ERP, you thought it was a 3-month project, it became a year or whatever it was. Did you have to stop your business or are you running things in parallel? Like how operationally do you do that? And like, is there a phase one for like less complexity that maybe a smaller brand might want to get? Or yeah,
we did run in parallel, and we had to make a tough decision at one point to postpone launch because launching during Q4 was gonna be tough. Yeah. So think about kind of start and end dates of the project.
Yeah,
it's tough to. I don't know how you would not do it in parallel. Like e-commerce is 24/7 and doesn't sleep. So part of the challenge of it and part of those scoping sessions is kind of how do we turn this on and not be disruptive?
Love it. Tim, I actually if I can throw it to you on this, because I know like Shopify just came out with, I'm going to butcher what it was, right? But it was like to facilitate ERP implementation for brands. Is that fair? Like I think NetSuite I saw, and I'm sure a couple others were part of that as well. Is there anything that you see maybe at like different stages of brand? Think like there's a difference between a $5 million brand and a $25 and $100 million top line brand. Like when is it like business complexity that might drive that decision? Is it, curious for your just general thoughts on the space.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different, as you said, different levels based on what the brand is doing. So sometimes it's going to be based on the number of markets that you're working in. If suddenly you're internationalizing and you're needing to deploy merchandise from several different warehouses, or if you're working with a new 3PL that needs to be able to track that better, then we find that integration then. And sometimes it's just a complexity in internal operations. As you're growing, you're getting more team members, you're getting more products, more SKUs. You jump from being able to manage everything in a spreadsheet to actually having to get an ERP system or something that's able to control that a little bit better. I think the biggest takeaway though is as you're implementing these things, making sure that the operations team and the customer and your own customer support team that make sure that everyone's talking, so that all those triggers are there and all the messaging is there. So you have this a cohesive conversation internally, because the last thing you want is to have that hearing something different from drip campaigns and from automated emails than what your customer service team is seeing and what your customer service team is telling your customers.
I love it. I mean, a big piece of this is definitely like, these are not decisions we're making the next 2 weeks to obviously hit. And one thing that we are talking to every merchant about is like, it is great, prioritize Q4 and do not forget about what a great 2022 looks like and what are the decisions you can make. Alex, let me go to Chaz and then I'll come back to you for a little bit about the like transition phase, but Chaz, what's up?
I was just gonna say, I think part of the interesting transition to watch over the last couple of years has been like, it used to just be an ERP system that like everyone would kind of dump all our data into. And I think what's really interesting about the space is kind of like supply chain software revolution of like, I think that the ERP of the future looks like a bunch of nodes in the network that starts to connect together through APIs, but whether that's like Brightflow on finance, whether it's Alloy.ai, like you're seeing more and more of these tools pick apart like certain aspects of it and allowing that to be like, not the same level of lift that it used to be, call it like 5 years ago, as more of these tools like also start to kind of talk together and realize that like, it's not just turning on the lights for these different silos, but actually starting to like connect them together to give you operational efficiency.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you. Alex, I think, do you want to chat at all about like that transition piece?
Yeah, I think just building off like what Drew was saying, I've been with a few companies that have kind of gotten to that critical point where they're, the company's growing and they're making that decision of, I'm noticing that a bunch of people in the company are doing the same thing, just different ways. And ultimately, as you think about expanding with partnerships, at what point does it make sense that there's efficiencies you have internally with just visibility or just communication between the teams? We can talk about like supply chain and upstream and downstream communication. So, I think just some things I've seen over the time is that definitely plan for it to be a significant chunk of your team's time. Also, I think important to have full buy-in from the whole company, like right away. And investment, I feel like a lot of times it's been maybe led by one department and it feels like we're only just partially putting our toes in, like not wanting to commit. And I think people are also scared to change their processes from like Excel or Google Sheets to like this new process, because I think there is obviously a pain point where people feel maybe they're doing two processes at once. But I think having that buy-in is like extremely important. And I think also having a lane leader in each department, like you're gonna have to figure out all the things from like the simplest, most granular task to like a much more of a macro view, and you're going to need people at all levels to determine what that is. And it's also just like a good reflection point to say like, this is how we've been doing it, but does this process make sense, especially if you're thinking about we're a $10 million business, at $50 million, $100 million business. Like a lot of us here have been at companies that have just hit this like very fast growth. They've gone from like, a very startup-y type of company to be like, oh, we need to like have like legit processes in place here. So I think having that buy-in across all departments is like extremely important.
I love it. I mean, it's like you're creating a new operating system for your business. At some point you grow up, you now need to do this. I want to change gears for a minute. I want to talk, because we've kind of hinted at supply chain in different parts, even just in the introductions. Bridget, I'm curious, because you said 2021 is much harder than 2020. I'm curious, like, what the changes have been, and like we're putting aside everything outside of just purely e-commerce operations. So let's focus there. Like, what have the changes been? What are you seeing now? Is it to do with the freight and like everything that's happening at the ports? Is it the outbound parcel? Like, what are the problems that you're seeing, and what are you guys doing to kind of fight those problems?
So prior to COVID, we had been really good at managing our supply chain, and we make footwear, right? So our components are pretty simple, and we were very good at having components on hand and then testing into demand. And when we saw something taking off, we had like a 30-day lead time to get the goods made, and then another 28 days on water. So we were in pretty good shape. Even in 2020 with COVID, because all our wholesale accounts canceled their orders in March, we had a ton of inventory. So it was just a matter of how are we going to move through that inventory. Then at the very end of 2020, leading into 2021, we started seeing delays in our supply chain, which meant that a supply chain where we could be really reactive and have goods in the DC in 60 days, it was now, 90 days on water, and it's hard to even get components. So we did a few things. Even though we're small, we actually do have four warehouses that we use to ship to customers. We have one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. In the United States, we have one in the UK for our European distribution, and then we have one in China that we opened over the summer, where we can ship directly to e-com customers in the US from China. So that getting inventory to the proper warehouse was a really big incentive for us this year. It turns out we really can't get inventory to the East Coast in any sort of reasonable amount of time. So it's managing our distribution for e-com from the China warehouse and from our LA warehouse.
I love it. Bridget, when you and I first met, so my background, I used to run a D2C brand, and then I started a company called Passport that does international shipping for D2C. And you and I were talking about Passport, I believe, is when we first met.
Yep.
And one of the big ideas was like, hey, what if the inventory is just scattered and you can drop ship from everywhere? And it's so fascinating that you guys are building out that capability. Any tips for the audience about how to approach it, like what the trade-offs are, right? Because there's obviously, there are trade-offs. Like how are you thinking about that? And something that you're going to extend once hopefully the supply chain issues ameliorate, they won't go away. Are you going to continue doing that going forward?
Yeah, I think based on what we've learned so far, it was a big decision, and it's much more expensive than trying to ship directly from a U.S. warehouse to a U.S. customer. But we did some calculations on how much we lost in sales this year based on not being able to get product in, and the number was so massive that we said we're willing to take a short-term hit on profitability to help fuel sales and to satisfy customer demand. So if an order in the US takes like 3 days to get to the customer from the warehouse, it takes about 11 days, and that's air to get from China to a customer in the US. And it's, kind of twice the price. There are some savings because the goods are under $800, so we don't have to pay tariffs. So there's some upside there, but it's not enough to offset the downside. What we think we're going to use China for when things get back to being a little more normal is if there's a shoe that we want to test demand on, we can get it made in China, get it to this warehouse pretty quickly, start running ads through social, measure demand, and then it saves us like 2 months in transits trying to figure out if customer is going to respond to the shoe or not. So I think it's always going to have a place for us, but we're slowly trying to move back to having more inventory in the US.
That's super creative. Chaz, give me 1 second. I just want to quickly follow up. What about the cash flow management piece of like, you're shipping it from a factory instead of putting it on a boat for 90 days? Do you find a benefit to that? Or are you at a scale where it's like, that's a nice to have, but we're actually more looking at like the unit cost of the shipping and the like?
Yeah, it's, so we've really maxed out our terms with some of our vendors, but even with our best vendors, if we're getting like 60 to 90 day terms and it's taking 60 or 90 days to get the goods in from China, the payments were due before the goods ever got to the warehouse anyway. So what this does allow us to do is we're able to sell something and then, get the cash right away. So it kind of offsets the cash flow.
Okay, understood.
We tried to manage it before by just putting items up on pre-order and letting customers order them. But because the delays are so unpredictable, it was a horrible customer experience saying, okay, it's going to be available November 1st. And it's not like it goes to November 5th. It's going
November 1st, what year?
To next year. So like this was the only thing that we could think of to try and work around some of that.
Super cool. Thank you for explaining that. Chaz, what's up?
I love the direction from China. I worked for PCH and for Liam Casey. PCH is Apple's biggest supplier of SKU. BTEP was built on the back of it. And his favorite saying is the bellies of 747s are the new warehouses, like direct wherever you can. And like you trade cash flow for margins. But like, if you can extrapolate out of just like your margin being, your what your BOM is to like, all right, what's the actual cost of capital of that, like those dollars being tied up, and understanding from like a CFO level of like, great, like, oh, we have a 6% cost of capital. What does that actually like mean to have that tied up for 120 days? Those trade-offs start to become actually a little bit more manageable. And I think you're seeing more and more of that now. Like, again, it only matters in like where the price to density ratio is right. So like phones are easy for Apple because it's high price, low density. You can ship them really easily versus smaller widgets. But it's fascinating to watch that philosophy start to like become present again and more relevant versus just the like, no, we've got to put everything on a boat to like maximize like, what our bill of materials margin are, or kind of what's our gross margin.
This is super cool. I didn't expect us to be going this way. Tim, please go ahead. And then I was going to ask Alex and Drew if they have any like tips separately.
The one thing I have merchants that have tried the same thing. The one thing that we learned as part of that is when you're arranging returns, is to make sure that if goods are being shipped from China over to the States, that if they do return them, that they're getting returned to a warehouse in the States, so you're not incurring that heavy cost of shipping things back. And the other thing was to, especially for garments and for footwear, is to try to have something on there that'll allow people to know their size better. Like there's some great apps you can get where it's like, know your size, fits like, so that people aren't buying 3 pairs of shoes and returning the 2 that don't fit them. Is that expensive?
Tim, if you want to, and anybody here, by the way, audience as well, if there are like tools that you've used that you really like for whether it's an important, like a big piece or a niche thing, like feel free to share it, right? Like, so if there are specific fit ones that you'd recommend, or we can send it out afterwards as well, if you want to think about that. I know you're Switzerland and you love all of your app children exactly the same. And I invite everybody to share tips. Drew, Alex, have you guys given the like, and again, we don't need to go further down this path if you don't want to, but do either of you, have you changed how you're running your business based on the fact that product might be on a boat or product is stuck, or you have these like massive chokes and just like getting the inventory in? Have you changed anything with pricing, your shipping, anything that's worth sharing? Drew, I'll give you the mic first if you want it, or you can pass to Alex.
Yeah, I mean, we're not doing the pre-sale game for the reasons that we discussed. It's just a little too risky. A lot of air versus ocean conversations are going on, like what's the cost of air versus the cost of not having those goods to sell. And a lot of times it makes sense to air, even though it's an insane multiple of what it cost last year. The other thing we've explored a lot is port pairing. So what's your origin port versus your destination port? And perhaps it makes sense to go to a destination port further from warehouse because that port might be less congested. But what we've found is that even the little ports are backed up, and it's continuously, when we've done that port pairing exploration, it's continuously made the most sense to just ship to the port closest to warehouse. So when the goods are finally available for pickup, like you're around the corner.
Love it. Thank you. Alex, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even especially in times like this, it's just important to create as much redundancy in your business as possible. And I would say, information is king. So things obviously at the ports and inbound logistics are changing every day, and unfortunately seem to be getting worse. I think having that information and making sure as a business you're asking those questions, or what are the implications of not getting this product here? Depending on what your assortment is, you could still be, our business primary is still very like core centric, but we still have very critical fashion seasonal pieces that we have holiday stuff or Halloween stuff, and like that's where the decision to air versus not, or having or not, and then ultimately if you get it late, what's this, how much do you have to discount it to get through that inventory? So I think having that information upstream and then being able to at least make those decisions is very critical. And then obviously having partnerships and creating redundancy in your supply chains to help you navigate times like this is just now becoming essential, where you need maybe one logistics freight forwarder partner, but now you should have three. So it's that's critical as well.
I'm curious, one more question on this topic. Does anybody have any tips or tricks of platforms or anything to do to improve your freight forwarding situation? There's a cool startup called Shipabo, for example, right? That will, and there are different companies that will help you maybe get more utilization, right? So if you prepaid for 10 containers before, right now you can only get 2, but maybe there are different ways for you to get 3, which is just it sounds like not a big deal, but it's 50% more inventory that you could get. Are any of you paying consultants using third parties, or is it hey, we're just scrambling and we don't I guess a different question, is there a playbook right now, or is it just fight the good fight?
For us, every time we think that we've found a solution to a problem, another problem like rolling blackouts pops up. So it's really hard to find something that is kind of a solve all for the supply chain. I think you can get, things that focus on specific pieces, but I'm like, what's next? I'm sure it's going to be a component shortage. And so it's just hard to kind of go back through the supply chain and anticipate all the issues. And just
buy your own container, ship.
Right. Yeah.
And do what Home Depot does, and then it's solved. Okay. I don't know why we're complaining about this, guys. It seems pretty straightforward. Bridget, I do want to stay with you for a minute, and then maybe we can go around again. So we've talked now about getting the inventory in stock and all the hassles and all how hard it is right now. And we're coming up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. How are you thinking about two different sides? One is discounting. I've seen very different opinions on should we, if we have limited inventory, should we be trying to maximize cash flow, or should we be trying to run through this inventory because it's seasonal, or it's just customer expectation? And separately, what are you changing this year versus previous years about your parcel shipping? Is it an earlier deadline? Are you setting expectations? How do you get to the point where you're not ruining Christmas for people, which was the worst emails I would get when I was a merchant. It was just terrible. I was I'm so sorry. Curious about all that.
So I don't think that we have any genius solutions here, but we are planning on anniversarying our cyber sale from the one that we do every year. And because of the delays, we actually are doing a friends and family sale on November 12th that mimics what our Cyber Week sale would be, just to try and get people some extra time to shop. And then I think we actually have to make our shipping cutoff. Well, I mean, in my opinion, for us at least, if somebody's ordering for Black Friday, I have no faith they're going to get their shoes in time for the holidays. So we're really trying to push it up as soon as possible. We're going to play around with some more expedited shipping methods. But we talked to our carrier. They said they're telling people December 10th. They don't even believe December 10th when they're saying it. So I think it's just trying to just bring up demand as much as possible. We actually don't have a big reason for discounting this year. Last year, we were basically 25 off site-wide for 9 months of the year. This year, we haven't been on site-wide promo at all. So this will be kind of the one that we do all year.
Understood. And that was more because of the glut of inventory because the wholesale business went away.
Exactly.
Got it. And then you mentioned you have your carrier. Are you at a point where you're exploring other carriers, or is it just like, hey, 6 of 1, or we're kind of stuck either way?
I think the only where we've really had problems is when we have carriers that hand off to USPS, and it's not the USPS, it's the problem, it's the handoff where we're losing visibility to the shipment for like 5 to 8 days. So we're with FedEx, and we just, our Smart Post now, it's FedEx the entire way to the customer. Because that's the only thing that we could find that was kind of helping our CX issues on a regular basis.
I love it. We'll come back to the CX stuff too, and visibility. That's spot on. Is like, what can we do as like brands right now to kind of remove anxiety from a customer so they're not writing in, hey, where's my package? If you know that there's a scan that's, or like it's in a warehouse, it's going to get through, like, how do you tell that story? Before we go to that, I'm curious, Drew, Alex, or Chaz, whether it's now from your D2C or like kind of thinking back in the past, maybe Drew first. What if anything are you thinking about from a parcel shipping, changing your deadlines this year, mix of carriers? What do you change?
Two thoughts on that. One is, we know it's inevitable that we're going to miss Christmas for some people. Like, it's just going to happen. So we're trying to do some analysis of, okay, if cutoff is the 10th versus the 11th versus the 12th, what percentage of people are you going to miss Christmas for? And thinking now, what are we going to do to those people to make it right? How are we going to apologize and make it up to them? So that's an action. The other thing we're doing right now is exploring with our carriers, or not exploring, but getting permission to drop off parcels at different hubs. So if, let's say, the hub in Los Angeles is totally backed up and they're having trouble inducting, can we drive somewhere like 20, 40 miles further away to induct if that hub has a little bit more capacity?
I love it. Alex, I want to go to you and then to Tim, maybe for like, if you're seeing anything kind of different or any other advice.
Yeah, and I would say even before we get to the carrier, it's like thinking about the whole time from click to delivery. So when you think about your cutoffs, they're also really depend on your fulfillment times. And so one, making sure your warehouse is accurate, as true forecast as possible is just critical. And then ultimately, has your fulfillment partners been hitting those forecasts, right? So when you're thinking like, these orders have to be picked up to stay and inducted, but like those orders also have to be fulfilled by that certain time. So I think like that's just like a very critical piece. And then, we also, as shipping has gotten more expensive, we've tried going more economic, we've gone more economy for us. So we've gone slower. So something we've done is that, if the cutoff is on the 10th for one service, we have like a 4-day period for behind the scenes. We're upgrading all standard orders to a faster service. So yeah, it costs us more money, but we're able to make that up in that extended sale times. Because when we think about what the sale is like, after you say that deadline is over, we typically just see sales kind of plummet. So I think like that is important. And I think the last thing is like making sure you have expedited services, like offering, you can meet those on the fulfillment times, because customers will pay, especially now, to get that order. So having your overnights, having your 2 days, and having a variety of different express options that people are willing to pay that extra dollar for will help you cover your costs, but also, extend your sales in that way by having those things.
I love it. I mean, I think one thing that we talk a lot about is like, it's not just that first order, it's also like lifetime value of a customer. So doing anything and everything to get him or her the product, even if you're, basically doing what Zappos did, right? Which is like, hey, we're going to upgrade you behind the scenes. You're not paying for it. Don't worry, you're getting the product in like a delightful period of time. Or in this case, in a time that doesn't make you very, very angry because you missed the holiday, is valuable. Sorry to interrupt you partway through. I'm really curious about the first point with the 3PL also. So what you said is like, basically, tracking your 3PL right now, like, are they hitting their SLA? If not, like, what's the discount? Is there any particular way you do it? Or is it more like, look, normally, like right now it's taking them 2.6 days to fulfill a package. It doesn't matter what they're saying. We should assume that. And by the way, in a week's time, we should make that 3.6 days. And like, you guys are just calculating and working backwards, or is there any other magic beyond that?
Yeah, I think it is looking at like what have they been able to say and what have they been actually able to do. And I think you have to err on maybe the latter, just because I think just when it comes down to it, short-term sales, even though very impactful in this time of year, when you think about your brand and your customer promise and the lifetime value, you really don't want to miss on these promises. So I think it is, unfortunately, to the detriment of sales in some ways, it is important to be conservative and making sure that you are timing things right. And then again, pulling other levers where possible to extend that sale time. So you're going to pay more to upgrade the shipping in certain areas, or offering express options. But I think everyone here probably can acknowledge, not just on the parcel side, but on the logistics, and depending where you're in the country, it's been very rough on the fulfillment time. So that's obviously an important piece as you're thinking about your click-to delivery experience.
I love it. Thank you. Tim, I want to go to you and give you space, because obviously, like, seeing across a breadth of brands, like, is there anything else that you're seeing companies do well, or maybe like taking on risk around the parcel side or setting the customer expectations? Like, what does best practice feel like to you right now?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing here is to make sure that everything is communicated up front, and understanding that when I hit buy on the site, I'm going to get that notification to say that I've purchased something. I'm looking at it with a few merchants more from a risk of chargeback, as customers don't get the goods that they've purchased. If they haven't heard anything, if there's no open line of communication, then it elevates that risk of a chargeback, because they haven't received it, and then they're going to go to another brand. They're going to rebuy that gift somewhere else, and where it's sitting on a boat or on a plane somewhere. So it's important to make sure that you have really, really strong bespoke communication with the customers to say, and be honest. I think that there's a really good place to be honest here, where you can say, we don't know when it's going to arrive. We've done this, this, and this, and here's what we're going to do to make it right. If it doesn't arrive by the time that we've said that it's going to arrive, and using a lot of like diversification of channels. Like, you've got email. Really, really highly suggest people look at SMS, an SMS provider, an SMS solution, because you're gonna reach your customers. They're gonna see it right away, and you're going. The more you communicate with them, the more you give them the opportunity to communicate back with you. You're gonna, to Alex's point, like, customer value on this, the customer loyalty, and being true to your brand, but also eliminating any of those, or trying to eliminate as many of those chargebacks as possible.
On the SMS side, is this more like the SMS marketing, or is this more like, hey, you just placed your order, by the way, ... Like, what, or is it all the above?
Yeah, I think it's less on the marketing side, more on the post purchase. We find, like, again, the Shop Pay app is addictive, because I can go in and I can look at where my packages are at any point. I can see it on a map. If I'm getting those updates, I'm going to feel more comfortable about something that may not arrive immediately, or may not arrive within a week. If I can see that, okay, it's left their factory, it's left their warehouse, I can see it sitting in Hoboken, I know that it's going to leave Hoboken eventually, and being able to get those periodic updates. And again, there's tools within Shopify. You can use like Shopify Flow, where you can go in and you can actually trigger these things and trigger messages, trigger things internally. But the more communication with the customer, I think in these cases is going to be better.
I think about this. I don't know if this is a good framing or not, but I think about it like, how do you obviate anxiety? And it's like by giving clear information up front. And there's the information that you get from a carrier, which is like left warehouse or departed facility. But the reality is like, what does that mean to me? And when you start going cross border, right, that's like in customs, and you're like, should I be scared by that, or should I not be? And so it's more, I think, starting from like a clear visual of like, whether it's through Shop Pay, right, through the trackside, or Malomo, or like other providers like that, where you can actually like see visually, like, okay, my package is scheduled to arrive on this date. And then the rest is like all the details, but it's like, don't worry, the package is scheduled to arrive. Choose, like, click here to get notified if anything changes. I think like the more brands can do that, the fewer customer service tickets you get. And that's both for the like forward commerce, like, am I getting it? And also the reverse commerce of like, when am I getting my refund? You don't want to get the like, hey, did you get it back yet? Like, visibility to me is like extraordinarily important there. Chaz, I want to throw you the question that came in on chat. I don't know if you saw it, and you're allowed to reject it, but you're a worldly person. You've been all over the place in a bunch of different roles. And this is more kind of forward looking for 2022. Like, I want to start with you and then open it up to everybody. Like, how are you thinking about inventory for 2022? Would you think about like, if you're a D2C brand, would you be buying a lot more right now, knowing that there's a big lag? Would you be actually like, forget buying more, go try to find a nearshore factory or like a domestic factory? Would you be focused more on what Bridget talked about with drop shipping? Like, how are you thinking about 2022 and how much are you ordering today? And how much do you even trust your forecast if you're ordering today, if you're in that position to like, I need to buy it now?
Yeah, I mean, doing F&B certainly have the luxury of producing domestically, which is great. I think I've never been more thankful for that. That being said, there's still component pieces that are coming from abroad, specifically jars and lids, like plastic jars and lids, for instance, are like, might as well be gold at this point to try to get your hands on. And so the way I always kind of think about it is like, if you've got the balance sheet for it, can you play with cash and like long lead time buy anything that's at high risk and just sit on it? So like, if I can find 150,000 like lids, cool, I'm buying it. And then I'll use things like settle or kind of other financing options to kind of, stretch that out as much as possible. Not everyone has that luxury of kind of playing with their balance sheet. Definitely realize that. But like for us, it's just been like, all right, we know, especially as we're stepping into wholesale next year, we have to be in DCs. We have to hit kind of those SLAs. Like, I can't let, chasing lids around the world be the thing that kind of ruins those early kind of contracts. And so that's kind of always been a bit of my philosophy. It's like, all right, what's, especially it's interesting, like CE versus F&B. Like in CE, you've got Aero and Avnet and others that like, if you really, really need a component like Bluetooth, like you'll buy it like 10x rates, but like they're the traders of the industry that, profit off that. Certainly in other industries, that's not always the case. Like it's, in this instance, it's actually not the big kind of Berlins of the world that have it. It's those guys are also allowed. It's more of the like smaller sub suppliers that like you have to kind of go find who, are sitting on 10,000 units here and there, which is a bit like whack-a-mole sometimes, but those are kind of some of the thoughts.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I was talking to my father-in-law who's like, who likes drinking a lot of wine. He's like, yeah, you can't even get bottles anymore. And I have a business idea, if anybody's interested, of buying a lot of $2 Chuck, drinking it, not drinking it, doesn't matter, cleaning the bottles and then selling it to like high-end wineries. So guys, let me know if anybody wants to work on that. Drew, you wrote out an answer. I'd be curious if you want to chime in with anything on top of what Chaz said, just like, or if everybody should just go look at what you wrote, because it was pretty spot on too about the trade-offs.
I can give the voiceover for it, which is just, someone asked about ordering heavy, like, do you just buy a bunch now to have it? But maybe people don't want that good when you eventually get it. And it's a huge hit to your balance sheet to lay out that cash up front. We've tried to just diversify inbound a little bit more. So sometimes LCLs are becoming available faster than FCLs. So if you either place 2 small POs or split a given PO across 2 different ship methods, like, you just give yourself a chance of at least one becoming available a little bit earlier.
Got it. That's actually slightly different than what I thought you said, so I'm glad you explained it. That's really helpful. There's a question about supply chain and vision for channels, right? One of the things that, I don't know if you guys have heard of like Amazon, but one of the things that I always think about with the like logistics side is that, hey, there are places where if your inventory's there, it will get there faster because they just have the scale. There's also like, you can distribute your inventory through your fulfillment channels, right? With kind of like more asset light 3PLs. What, if anything, has like the last year done to change your view of channels and how you should, whether it's like your own brick and mortar, more wholesale, more online, like brick and mortar wholesale, online wholesale, Amazon, not Amazon. Bridget, maybe we can start with you, and then I'll probably have a quick follow-up about your brick and mortar strategy and like what's good, what's bad, but how, if at all, have you changed your kind of view going forward for channels?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when Soludos started out, we were mainly a wholesale company, and about 5 years ago, we started switching more to B2C. Wholesale, although there's a ton of issues, it's a pretty profitable business because customer acquisition costs have just gone up so much and fulfillment costs have gone up so much over the years. So for us, wholesale is still important from a cash flow standpoint because it's just generating cash and we can borrow against receivables and inventory. So it's, from that standpoint, it's pretty nice. The wholesale accounts no longer want to take big orders up front. They want to just mitigate their risk and just place a few, small orders across a bunch of styles and then try and reorder into what's working. But because we can't really hold inventory at that level, it's like kind of a natural downtrend in our wholesale business because we can't afford to hold the inventory for them to potentially chase into. So it's just leaning more and more into our own e-com and retail stores where we are much better predicting what inventory needs are going to be.
So let me actually just follow up with you quickly about the retail side. And then Alex, maybe we can go to you to talk about channels a little bit. You guys have, I think you have 2 locations, is that right? Or
we have two of our own retail stores, yeah.
Okay. And what was the decision to go into retail? What if you were to like remake that decision today, what if anything would you have changed, whether it's some markets or how many stores you opened, and what would prevent you from opening up 50 stores? Like how do you think about scaling the retail side?
So we're pretty lucky because we can manage through retail with a really small footprint. So our stores are about 800 square feet. So we approach a market like Austin and say, this is a market where Austin really specifically was because we wanted to test the overlap between retail and e-com. And when we had stores in New York and LA, you couldn't do it because it was just way too much data. Like it was just the markets are way too big. So we opened the store in Austin to just try and understand the crossover and the real customer acquisition costs if you have a store in a market, which we've been able to do. So I think what we're doing, and we're going to actually start scaling retail back again. My best advice around that is just go where you can get a really good deal on the rent and you can get an out on the space. So in all of our leases, we can get out after a certain amount of time if we're not hitting sales targets or just get out for any reason. That's been the biggest thing for us over the past few years, testing our retail.
Have you considered, my cousin got married in Kansas City this year, and it's like there was like a strip where it had like all the D2C brands, right, were there. Have you considered like kind of following where the other brands are, or is it like truly just go into geography where you have a reasonable like population of people who like you and go find the best space?
Yeah. What we found from just looking at retail is as soon as we're looking at a market, there's all the D2C brands that you would expect are looking at the same space that you are. Right. So you go in, we looked in San Francisco, we looked in Austin, and everybody's just trying to get the same location. So it's just what are you bringing to the landlord?
I love it. I'm going to Tim, even though I just said I was going to go to Alex, but I'm a liar sometimes. So we're going Tim first, and then Alex, you're next.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the retail bit is interesting because we see a lot of merchants now rethink what retail should be and what retail could be. So they're reopening retail spaces because people will go there, but they're rethinking it as an experiential site. They're looking at it as a community, as a hub, and having maybe not even having the sale happen there, but having them order online, buy online, pick up in store, and really changing what that retail space looks like. Because there are a lot of brands that own that space or they have long-term leases on those spaces and they want to be able to use them. On the channel side, very quickly, what I would say is that be wherever your customers are. If your customers are rabid TikTok users, it's an amazing channel. If they're rabid Instagram users, if they're wherever they are, be there, make the investment to be there. Amazon, again, where I'm going to say on this, Amazon can be a useful channel, but it's a race to the bottom. You want to make sure in everything that you're bringing customers back to your site so you can own the message, you can own the branding. But as I say, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places, if your customers are there, it's so hard and so expensive to get a customer now that you might as well put the net out as wide as possible.
Yeah, my approach on Amazon when I talk to random brands, and this is like dated, and I haven't been an operator for a long time, so take it with a grain of salt, is always like maybe have 1 or 2 SKUs that are like the default. If somebody's searching for you, they can get it. But like when they fall in love with your brand, they need to go back to you. Is like if I were restarting a brand, that'd be probably like the limit to the approach I would take. Is like they're there, let them see you and move on. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that experience side of the retail. And Alex, curious if you can even like think back. You were at BOMBAS, right? But were you there when like guide shops started? If you have any thought on that and how that's changed, or how Primary might think about channels as well.
We're still pretty much e-com only at Primary, though we're expanding. But at BOMBAS, when I started, our first guide shop, or as they call it, was in our headquarters, and it was kind of like a test on seeing how can we rethink what the shopping experience can be when you start as an online brand. Obviously, in the last 10 years, think about all the major brands that have come up and rethought that process. You know, I think the shopping experience and expectation has like changed dramatically because of that. And I would say there's, you know, for a small brand, there is a lot of benefits to testing that in shopping experience. You know, for Bonobo specifically, you know, getting into Nordstrom was like a big deal for us. Being, you know, we thought, you know, we had this big persona online, but I think, you know, when we talk about customer acquisition costs, you know, we ended up being all in 116 doors in Nordstrom and on their online business. And I think just from a brand awareness, that's just stuff that's very valuable as you're an expanding brand, as you're just thinking about, you know, your product costs and be able to buy with better margins that obviously help with it. And then we think about not just wholesale, but then brick and mortar, it you know, it does allow you to rethink what the shopping experience can be. And similar to what Bridget just said before, you know, Bonobo's strategy was trying to get into these markets like very small footprint, ultimately, but getting those high traffic markets. And then ultimately, you know, if you can have a small select SKUs and you can deliver on fast and a consistent delivery experience, like people don't need to like walk out of the store anymore with that. And I think, you know, in general, as an e-commerce company, you know, for depending on what your product is, that for apparel, you know, it could be anywhere between 20 and 30%, but you see that really drop significantly when people are actually trying it on. You know, and that's a big benefit of doing that as well.
Yeah. Returns are the worst. Am I right? Okay. Drew, anything, I want to give space if you want to chat about channels at all, or how you guys have thought about it over the years or now, or if there's nothing to add, no need to.
One thing we've just noticed is how differently e-com and wholesale behave. Like e-commerce is 24/7, small orders, couple units. Wholesale is periodic, big orders and very specific pack out requirements if you have a diversity of retailers. So we've just evaluated over time, like, do we have the right teams? Do we have the right systems for this stuff? Because we probably started wholesale a little bit prematurely, and there's a lot of manual work if you don't have the systems in place. So I don't know, think about ERP, think about EDI, and do you want to have those softwares in place before you go down the wholesale road?
I love it. Two different channel questions, and Chaz, I'm going to throw the second one to you because you mentioned it in chat. Have any of you experimented with FAIRE, F-A-I-R-E, as far as like the wholesale and the small? Bridget, curious for your take on that. If it's like useful, because you mentioned that like the big wholesale orders are now getting shrunk, and one of FAIRE's promises is it's like really great for all boutiques because they can get, I think it's like, you know, $500 minimum order, $250 minimum order. Has that been useful? Not like anything that would be relevant for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so we started using FAIRE this year, and the average order came out to be like 10 units or something. So it's really hard to justify the pick pack expense on that. And you have to really monitor if you're like trying to protect your brand. It's a little more difficult on FAIRE to see who is ordering to make sure that it's going to exactly to where you want the goods to go. But I mean, I think they're pretty effective. They have a big base of smaller specialty accounts.
Yeah.
It's another one of those things, as Drew said, where it's more work than you expect it's going to be upfront for, for us, at least with small volumes.
Understood. I think my take on the wholesale side is it's like, especially as it's grown over the last couple of years, it feels like as you're getting going and dipping your toe, kind of analogous to your like, hey, we might ship some products from China as like a test before we decide to like launch this line. That can give you a sense of like, is there a real wholesale market before you go and you hire a team to build that out all together? Chaz, you mentioned Leap. I'm curious if you can share anything about that or any other thoughts you have about like how you might get your products out in brick and mortar in front of folks.
Yeah, Leap is a company I'm just a fan of. They help you kind of open up your own stores and basically run them for you and leverage data to understand where to do it, what inventory to put in there, et cetera. So just one of the options as people look at like open up their own, especially for a lot of kind of DTC brands. Yeah, I mean, I think like on the wholesale side, I think you build your brand online, you build your business in retail quite often. I mean, it depends on the category certainly, but for us, we think about like, look, instead of kind of going the local regional specialty and taking the operational lift of selling into like a fairway market for 5 doors, that I'd much rather put that same lift into online marketplaces where you get a lift like Thrive or other places. And then ultimately use that as kind of the brand building as you step into, a Kroger or a Walmart or a Target on the F&B side where you get to kind of real scale. I do think like you've got to, like everyone kind of said, know eyes open what you're going into, and have made the mistake of made a lot of these mistakes in retail before, when selling in Home Depot and a few other places. But a big part of it too is just visibility of like, right, where's my actual inventory, where's my demand, and I'm actually kind of meeting that. And again, there's more tools out there today, I think, and there was kind of 4 or 5 years ago. But always one of the challenges, especially as people like start using EDI for the first time, as mentioned.
I love it. By the way, Chaz, in about 9 minutes, you've got 3 to 4 meetings just popped up, I think. Okay, so we do have 9 minutes. There are 4 topics I want to go through really quickly. So I'm not going to ask you each, but if anybody wants to chime in, the topics are shipping insurance. Does that solve? Is it useful? Is it like a nice to have after the fact? I'm curious if anybody has a strong opinion about that. What, if anything, you're doing with gift cards right now, especially given like shipping? Are you like pushing less sales and more gift cards? Something different, right? Or are you going to open up gift cards on December 10th? Like, hey, it's too late to get this or like, good luck, take your chances. Or you can get a gift card and give the gift of clothes, socks, shoes, etc., chocolate snacks. And then there was a question in advance about hiring in this market, especially as you guys are all growing quickly, and we have brands that might be $1 million or $50 million or bigger on this call also. Like, any tips around hiring quickly? So I'm going to let people raise their hand. Like, actually, you don't need to click the button. Who, if anybody, wants to talk about shipping insurance? Does anybody have a strong opinion about whether it's useful, if you're using it, not using it? Okay, my take on shipping insurance, thank you so much for asking, everybody, is like, I think it's a nice to have. I think it's inexpensive enough. It does not solve the you ruined Christmas problem. So if you want to do it, just like do it for yourself. It is a pain in the butt more often than not to go and like actually get the claim. So if you're going to do it, do the claim on behalf of the merchant, on behalf of the consumer, pay them, like refund them, send them 2 extra orders, like do anything to make it up to people. If you like, it's not your fault. Sorry, it's not your fault, guys. If like the delivery doesn't hit, and maybe you're doing that for yourself. That's my strong take on shipping insurance. It's like, it's fine, but that's not going to solve the problem. What about gift cards? And Tim, yes, my man.
I was going to say, I absolutely love gift cards. Whether it's using it as a diversification, so instead of using heavy discounting, using gift cards as part of a loyalty program. Having them as an option to not only receive yourself, but to send digitally to a recipient, or there are apps where you can actually tie it in so they actually receive a physical gift card as well, so you could have that gift card be used in a retail space. So gift cards are great, and it gives you a little bit more stability because you already have that cash in hand, and again, you can report on it now, knowing that they might not use it until the Q1, Q2 of next year. So
I love it. Has anybody changed any of your processes or anything around gift cards? Like, are you leaning more into this now than you were in the past? Bridget, I'll just call on you. Sorry. Anything that you've changed around that?
No, I mean, gift cards are pretty small business for us. We will start leaning into them in the holidays, but it hasn't really been a huge focus for us.
Yeah.
For primary, we basically, I would say like anything that's involved in gifting, literally 4X's from any other time of the year when you think about November, December. So you think about like just offerings on the side of like gift messaging and gift wrap, like making that, like having that as an option, like that does add to sales, and people want that as well. So I think like that's important. And we also push gift cards digitally after our cutoff. So we do that. And this is maybe not super relevant to like smaller brands, but one of the most interesting things I saw around custom companies doing around gift cards, it's a big retailer, I forget which one it was, but they would include like as like an insert in their orders, like a physical gift card that has like a last minute, like, oh, I didn't get some of this. Like it was like a reminder, like, hey, I can just go to the site and like load this up.
Oh,
and
so you can
like,
load it. Cool.
Yeah. So it's like, oh wait, it's like last minute, and that probably works for maybe a more general brand companies, but as you think about opportunities around like, oh wait, like what am I going to do for last minute shopping? Like here's something that's actually there. It's just a cool way to kind of do something. So I saw that a couple years ago, and always like that'd be very cool to implement.
I love it, guys. You have 3 weeks to solve this. Everybody just but it's a really clever idea. Drew, I actually want to turn to you around hiring. If you have any thoughts, you guys have obviously grown a lot over the years. Any particular like tips or tricks to hire as you're scaling now in the future, or even looking back a year, because you're probably a stage ahead of most folks who are listening to this?
Get people before you need them is probably our biggest lesson learned. I mean, it stinks to be in the throes of holidays and underwater and wishing you had extra sets of hands. So we're now thinking about hiring on like a 3-year planning timeframe, whereas in the past, we'd only thought about like, what hires do we need in the next 6 to 12 months, where now that 36-month forward-looking view has helped us.
I love it. Thank you.
One other thing too on
Please.
the like last minute shopper experience, one thing we get a ton of requests for is like a PDF insert card that people can print out to put under the tree, to have something physical to hand to someone if their gift is going to be late. So that's something we produced this year. That's
really cool. Thank you. All right, we have 3 minutes left. Tim, I'm actually going to hand to you, and then if anybody else also wants to, everybody has 2 weeks, 3 weeks until Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then they're also thinking about 2022, and then Drew's on a 3-year plan, so 2025, I think, is what we're talking about on this. Any last words of wisdom for everybody who's in the throes of it right now? Any big tips, big takeaways that we should sit with?
That's a great question, especially to say, I need to put a reminder, I need to put a ticker tape above my doors or above my monitor that says how many days we have left. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is to rethink your existing customer base. I was on a call with a merchant, and they challenged their team to look at the average lifetime value of their customer and said, what can we do to make that 50% bigger? What can we do from a subscription basis? What can we do from a cross-sell, upsell? How can we take our really loyal customers and make them even more loyal? So I think it's a good time for everyone to look at loyalty programs, to look at how you recapture a customer after purchase, and how do you draw more value out of them with subscriptions. And there are subscriptions in the weirdest of places. I think every business could find a way to add a subscription or find a way to add a cross-sell, upsell up in there to help out that average customer value.
I can confirm this. My D2C brand was a watch company, and I started a watch of the month subscription in like 2014. So anything can be a subscription. Anything.
One of my favorite restaurants is doing a ramen of shipping every month. They send you ramen to make. So
put it in the chat, man. That sounds awesome. Okay, so last but not least, Alex, any last minute takeaways for folks, please?
Well, yeah, I would say it's no one likes to hear this, but there's always this peak of returns that come after the holiday season, and I think that obviously is thinking about logistics and who goes from where's my order to where's my refund context like pretty quickly after that time period. And so I think just like the space has been pretty innovative in the last couple of years about partners that can help you with that. Obviously, Aaron, you're very familiar with one of them being a Loop. But ultimately, I think that is like as you think about just like peak outbound, it comes back the other way very quickly. I think merchants should be aware about tools and systems to help with that.
I think it's a really good point. I would, first of all, like the number one day is going to be December 26th when somebody's on their phone saying, I don't want this. And like the thing that you want to do is like, that's fine if they don't want it. You want to help them find something else in your catalog that they do want, right? So it's not about retaining that dollar there, but it's also like retaining a customer who becomes lifetime value. So I think that's just like, it's a different framing. So there's still time. You don't need to worry about it today, but like get your policy, forget like even switching platforms, just get your policy in order. By then, a better policy means higher upfront conversion. Chaz, you got 30 seconds, man. I saw you message that you might have a takeaway. Anything you want to share?
Oh, it was just to an earlier point of like find tools to test, figure out like where you can convert into subscription or pay. Tools like Intelligems that make this super easy to like actually have a much higher like fidelity or kind of POV on what consumers actually want and are willing to pay for.
Cool, I love it. Guys, that's it. We're at the hour. Thanks. By the way, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but Okendo helped us pull this together. So I want to thank them. And thank you to all the participants. Let's go get some ramen, subscription ramen. And good luck this holiday season, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.